Well, hey cross kart fans. So here's where we are. We've got 3 cross karts ready to go, ready to race, ready to cause some trouble. And what we need to do now is figure out how to get them to the venues, get them to the races, get them to where they're going to stomp everybody there. So it's trailer outfit day. Now what I've got, just to start out with, there's more to come, but I've got 16 LED light strips and I've got 64 feet of DC wiring. So obviously, since it's dark in here, we're going to start out with the lighting and then we're going to move on to whatever else we need. There is a plan, so hang in there. Alright, so first up on the list is I like to work from a clean pallet, and when I got this trailer it was already outfitted with some shelving, with some brackets on the sides. I believe it was used for a mowing company. So we're going to strip it down, get it to bare bones, and then start from scratch. Now, this is a 2-foot V-nose, and just taking out these shelves made all kinds of room. So if I were to put a cross cart all the way to this line before the V-nose, it means without these shelves I could walk around it. So that's kind of huge, but losing out on those shelves kind of sucks. But I didn't cut up the shelves, they're still intact. We'll get to those later, but for now we got to get some lighting. Now the power source for all of this is a marine RV battery. So we are going to just temporarily just put that in place. We're going to run all the wiring, get the lights, and then we'll figure out how we're going to mount it. Alright, so we've got our wires. I bought 2 switches. Now the plan is, as far as lighting, is to mount 2 different switches of lighting. So I'm going to put a switch on the tail end that's going to light up 6 lights, 5 lights, something like that. And then a forward switch that's going to light up 12 lights, 11 or 12 lights. Now, the first step is going to be running voltage or power from the battery to the switch, and then from the switch to the lights. So let's do that. We don't know where we're going to mount this battery, so this is the worst case scenario. Mounting it up front in the middle would be the worst case scenario. So we're going to have plenty of wire if we run it from this point. So if we ended up mounting it up here, it's just going to be excess wire. Alright, now next is mounting the lights. And what I've decided to do is go 2 lights, 1 light, 2 lights, 1 light, 2 lights, and so on. And those are going to be on different circuits. So the single lights are going to be on an aft switch, light switch, so that if you open the back door, you can just flip on the light and you can see the entire cargo compartment. But if you come in the front door, you can switch this light on and you can have 12 lights at the ready to light this whole thing up. And obviously you can switch both on to have a fully lit, super bright cargo compartment. We're gonna mount those lights. Now, each light I got comes with a hardware pack. You can see that there's 2 mounting holes, 1 on each end, and there is a on and off switch. Now this is important because I want to leave the lights on. So when I flip the switch, they all come on. So make sure you get lights with an on-off switch rather than just a button. Now they all come with a hardware pack. Now there's 2 mounting brackets where you just slide them in and they stick, but there's also 2 magnets and 2 screws. Now I'm going to use the brackets in case I need to pull them down and change them for any reason. I was going to use the magnets, but in a trailer and bouncing just didn't seem like the best idea to me. So I'm going to use these brackets. I went to the hardware store and I got a whole bunch of self-tapping 1/2 inch number 6 screws so that when I screw them in, it's not going to interfere with anything. And they look about like that. Alright, so all the lights are hung. Now we just need to power them. So we have power running to our switch. Now we just need power running to our lights. And all we're going to do is run a long strip down. And then we're going to just connect them in line with that. Alright, so this is the last light in the series. So it is going to be powered directly. Strip them. And we'll just butt splice these in. Now we'll just get our wire running from the switch. We are crimped. Good tight connection. Positive, positive, negative, negative. This is DC, makes it easy. Alright, so all of our wires are run, and to make this easier, I bought splices. So you have one light going in, and it connects to the series of lights in line. Alright, so now we just crimp them in line with that final strand. Now we can pull this tight because we know this is the end of our loop. Once you get that cut, you should be able to just pull them apart. That way you keep the shrouding in place where it needs to be. Now, what we need to know is which side is negative and which side is positive. On the back end, positive is on the left, negative is on the right, so I'm going to check my cheat sheet. Alright, so it looks like the right side of the clear piece is the inside of the outside piece. Negative is running on the right side. I've got it flipped, so I need positive on the inside, which is just a pair of channel lock pliers for me, and connection should be made. Alright, so now we're working with DC, which makes it kind of easy. You just hook negative to negative, right? You splice those together because it's ground. All you need for DC power is a ground and a positive. That's what makes the wiring of this so easy and why I decided to go with it. Now the positive, now this isn't hooked up to the battery yet. The positive goes through the switch. Alright, so now we go to our switch and we flip this on. There we go. Lights on, lights off, lights on, lights off. Switch is working. The only two we've hooked up are working just fine. So now we know we have power to that final light. All we got to do is hook up the rest of the lights that we want on this circuit using those splicers. Let's check it out. They didn't come on. Make sure to turn them on. Look at that. Man, this is nice. How about that? So that's our one circuit of light. And you can see the difference it's making in here already. So here's our switch hanging out against the wall. Flip it off, no light. Flip it on, tons of light. It's so cool. Alright, so from here I'm just going to tidy up the wiring. Alright, so this next bit is actually pretty simple, but super necessary. All these straps just laying on the floor is going to prematurely wear them out, going to make them rust, and it just looks awful. So we are going to put in some hangers for them. Alright, so first things first is to choose a location. Now, if you put it right here, you might shoulder chuck it. If you put it right at head level, you're going to hit it with your head. So I'm going to put it where you don't walk much. One here and one on the back left. All right, so now the fun part, the solar system, also known as PV or photovoltaic. Now you've got your 100-watt panel, you've got your charge controller, you've got your positive and negative coming from the PV cell, and then you've got your positive and negative battery terminal hookups. Now, some things to look for when you're buying one of these. You need a charge controller. This is the most important part. If you get a crappy panel, it's just not going to put out very much watts to charge your system. If your cables aren't the right gauge, then there's going to be high impedance and it's going to lower the performance of your system. But this, the brain of it all, is so important. I got a 4-stage PWM automatic charge controller. It works with lithium batteries, it works with deep cycle gel batteries, and it works with flooded batteries, which is what I got because they're the least expensive. Now, the 4-stage PWM means there's 4 modes. It's got a boost mode, so midday when your battery's low, it'll crank the juice up and get your battery topped off quickly. But the most important thing is that it's got a float mode. So when the battery's charged, the system's full, it's not going to keep trying to pump voltage and amperage into your battery and cause it to explode. Simple and inexpensive. This was $169 on Amazon. It is a Raycing Wanderer, and there's some optional accessories. There's a temp sensor and a Bluetooth hookup. I'm not going to use those. So the first thing it says to do is hook the battery up to the controller. It gives several warnings to not hook the panel up before you hook up the battery. If you're just running voltage to this without an output, it's going to fry this like instantly. So we'll find a good mounting point for this and then we'll hook up the battery. All right, I haven't 100% decided on where I'm going to mount the battery. There's some things I'm going to do first before I figure out the final mounting positions, but the charge controller is pretty easy. I'm just going to put it probably right there, maybe higher in case I put the shelf back in. I don't want anything blocking that possible space there. So 4 screws, put it in, make sure your cables are long enough before you mount it, or you're going to have to buy some cable, and cable is expensive. All right, so the next step is mounting the solar panel. Now, obviously, I'm going to mount it on the roof, but how I'm going to mount it on the roof is a whole different story. Now, it comes with these mounting brackets. We're going to set some of these in place, measure the distance, and hope the ribs on the trailer match up. Wouldn't that be something? It's like this trailer was meant for a solar cell. This is 21.5 on center. All right, so we've got a really, really floppy roof. It keeps it light, but as far as winter goes, I don't want to store this thing outside. I get a lot of snow in New York. So, one good positive about this being floppy is that I can feel exactly where the ribs are. The ends of them, the center of them. So, we'll be able to mount this panel exactly where we want it. Just gonna lay this into place. Like I said, I could feel exactly where the ribs are. Now, something I did to help with alignment, here's your cross brace. I drilled a tiny 1/16 hole right at the edge of this. And I did that at all 4 corners of the solar panel is measured out. That way when I'm on the roof, I have a definite position as to where this cross beam is, and I can get my solar panel exactly where I want it. So here you can see the hole I drilled. I went just inside that because that represents the wall of that square tubing, and you can see hopefully the other hole there, which means all I got to do is line that up and then line up the backside. Screw them all in, and the panel is mounted. Now, don't RTV it yet. We have to run the positive and negative battery cables. All right, so now it's just time to drill the holes for the power cables for the solar panel. Obviously we know the panel is sitting right here between these two beams. Now I'm not going to drill up because the solar panel is sitting there. So I'm going to go to the top, figure out how I can make the wires nice and tidy, drill down, throw the wires in, then we'll RTV all the holes and we'll be done with the roof, and all the rest will just be inside. All right, so we've got the solar panel placed. Now we just got to drill the holes, which we know are going to go right here. Now if we look at the bottom side of this, the controller's up at the top, but it opens up a lot of room because there's excess here. So I'm just going to drill 2 holes right there and sort it out later. All right, the 2 holes are drilled. Now I'm just going to be dropping these in. All right, now these are in. We have our little pigtails. Let's bring our solar panel over. Now these aren't plugged into the battery. Like I said, the instructions were explicit about not plugging them into the battery, or the panel into the battery, before you plug them in to the battery. All right, so those are hooked up. So now it's time for RTV. All right, there's our 2 wires coming through. Now remember, do not hook these up to the control panel before you hook up your battery. All right, the battery's hooked up. We've got green lights for the batteries. Green, sealed battery. All right, so don't forget to mark which wire is which. On my setup, I put the negative going forward. So I'm going to label these in case I ever disconnect it at any time. I'll have a quick reference and I'll never get my wiring backwards, and my controller will be safe from stupidness. So now it's time for the system check. I'm just showing you the install. Tidy up is going to be on you. How you want to run your wires, how neat you want to make it, and whatnot. I'm just showing you the bare bones install so that this isn't a super long crazy video. All right, we'll get these hooked up and then the PV light should illuminate.
Positive. Nice.
So this flashing slowly, the PV or photovoltaic, and this being solid green means battery is charging normally. So there we go. Our battery is currently being charged. How awesome is that? And there we go. The solar system is installed. Our battery is currently charging. Now, according to the specs of a 100-watt system, this size battery, or 50 amp battery, this one's 65, 50 amp battery at 50% will be fully charged in 3 hours of decent sunlight. So this one's going to be, what, 4 hours? I don't know. I don't need to do the math on it. It's going to be topped out. We're not going to be draining this battery completely. Everything is kind of overkill by about 50% of what we need, but I'm super happy with it. I'll clean all these up. I'm going to let the RTV settle in before I start manipulating these, and then I'm going to put some RTV on the inside as well. All right, on to the next evolution. We've got lights, we've got solar to recharge our battery so we can go off grid for a few days. Now it's about maximizing the space in here. So we've got a 3,000 pound winch. This is probably not actually 3,000 pounds, but I don't care because I'm only lifting about, I don't know, 100, 150 pounds. The front end of the buggies are pretty light. So the plan is to mount this and then lift up a front end of one of the buggies, pull one under it to maximize the space in here for coolers, barbecue, spare parts, tires. There's a whole bunch of stuff going into this trailer to outfit it for a race weekend. That's the whole idea. The reason I haven't mounted the battery yet is because I don't want long cables going from the battery to the winch. I want to keep those kind of short, keep the impedance down, give this winch maximum amperage to do its thing, even though it's should only be working at 5% of its maximum workload. We'll see. so my dream setup is to lock these rear wheels down at the first part of this, leaving the space where you're sitting, where the camera's sitting, free and open. No. All right, so I've got a bunch of this left over from reusing the jig from the second one I made. So it is 0.065, unfortunately. If I had my choice, I would go with 0.120, obviously for the strength. What I'm going to do is I'm basically going to build a structure that goes up here that I can use a snatch block to go to the winch. Alright, so here's a rough sketch of what we're going to make. We're going to make basically just a structure that goes around so that we're not stressing out the trailer. We're going to bolt it to the floor all the way through, hopefully finding a cross member underneath, and that's going to give us a strong point for winching, and then also strong points on the corners for strapping it into place so that the structure is holding it and not the ceiling of the trailer itself. So what we need to do is get these measurements, fill it in, and then build the structure. Alright, so here's what you missed. This was too big for me to do alone, so I had to call a buddy. We got these pieces out. I fully welded the top. And so the feet are in. It's just tacked in right here, but everything's square. It's perfectly vertical. He just did a stellar job helping me out, and I couldn't have done it without him. So let's keep driving on. I'm going to make the triangulation support pieces. And we're getting close to the test. All right, so the basic structure of the gantry is done. I know we're not launching something off of it, but I still like the word gantry. Now, before we finalize the welding and put all the fittings on, there's one thing we got to check. It's strong. We don't need to reinforce this. That 0.065 looks like it's going to work out just fine. I'm around 185, and I didn't see any bending or feel any bending at all from this structure. So it's going to be enough to lift up the front end, and then the corners where it's going to be strong is going to be where the tie downs go. So we've got plenty of strength, and we're going to gusset these corners to add strength where the tie-down fittings are going to go. Now, next step is to put in our attachment points. Now I'm going to put 3 rings in. I'm going to put one right in the middle to hold the snatch block, and then I'm going to put 2 on either side for the strap fittings. Too easy. But before we do any of that, we're actually going to test this. We're going to mount the winch and then actually just winch it up. See what kind of clearance we get, see if the structure is going to hold, and then finalize it. Alright, so moving on to the winch. I reinstalled this top shelf because the line angle was too great to mount it low. So this is 1-inch plywood, and like I said, don't be too hard on me, but I'm not pulling a lot of weight. So I'm going to run the winch here. I'm going to put some extra cleats on the top. I'm going to use some extra screws, and I'm going to fabricate a bottom plate to go under the shelf so that it sandwiches this thick, sturdy plywood and uses the strength of this whole area rather than just the piece of plywood it's mounted to. Alright, so upon further inspection, this plywood's only 1/2 inch thick. So I've got some 1-inch thick laying around in these convenient sizes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sandwich it. I'm going to use my 1 inch is shoring. So I'm going to put a piece here, then the 1/2 inch, and then a piece underneath to utilize the strength of the whole area. Just mounting to that 1/2 inch, I don't think it's going to be strong enough. It might be, but I'd rather just do all this once. You know what I'm saying? Alright, so we got the 2 cleats installed. We've got a top shoring and we've got a bottom shoring. There's a little bit of flex, not much, just a tiny bit. It's enough to where I'm okay trying it. I'm very okay trying it. So now we got to run power to the winch. Too easy. There's a winch controller. I'm going to mount that on the wall, run the power wires down to the battery through the little cutout I made in the back of this shelf. So you guys are pretty smart. I didn't feel the need to walk you through every step of that. The controller is mounted. Off of that comes the lead wires to the battery and the lead wires to the motor. Make sure you keep positive and negative correct. Make sure you have nice clean wiring if you can. The mount's good. We've got the power wires running and they were long enough to reach the battery right there. I don't know if you could see it in the time lapse, but instead of taking out that shelf and disassembling a bunch of things, I just pulled the breaker panel apart so that I could fish it through that hole. Made it a lot easier. So now it's time to test the winch. Now when I bought this winch, it wasn't the cheapest and it was by far not the most expensive. I think it was just over $100. And there was some bad reviews on it saying the remote didn't work. And yes, I paid an extra $10 or whatever to buy one that has a wireless remote. Now, they were saying the batteries are dead, but you have to turn on the remote. Hold both buttons. Light comes on, and it's ready to go. Now, let's see if we hooked it up right. Nice. So it's kind of loud, but I don't care. I mean, loading operations don't have to be quiet to be efficient. The only thing I see is that this piece in the front may interrupt our straight line pull. I did hook up the fair lead as you saw, but since we used those shoring blocks, we could use more shoring blocks to raise it to get a better angle, or we could just remove this front piece. Now this does have a function on it where you can free spool it, which is pretty important to me because I know how slow winches can be. My line of work requires me to use winches a lot, and our winch is pretty heavy duty, so we're not allowed to free spool it. Alright, so we'll run the hook, or the cable, whatever you want to call it, through the snatch block, then put it into the D-ring. And there we're going to have our pull, just like that. Let's get to work. Alright, so I did a little work off camera. I put in these gussets. I measured this out, put a spacer in, and bolted it to the wall. Now this isn't the only support. It's got the leg there with its own gusset, and I bolted it in 2 spots using self-tapping techs is what they're called, but just self-tapping screws. Same with the other side. I measured it up. I only did full welds on these because they're not going anywhere. The spacing's perfect. It fits nice and tight. That's easy. Just cut it, 1/16 long, trim it down till it squeezes in. These gussets really aren't going to do anything sitting still, so we are ready for a test. I drilled out the tops, put the eye bolts in. There's a center eye bolt. So now we're just ready to hook this up. I already strapped in the back. My daughter wanted to come help, so she helped me strap the back tires down. So we'll get it hooked up and see if it lifts. All right, so the order of operations, as I said, is first going to be the D-ring into the eye bolt. Then we're going to put the rope into the snatch block, bolt it to the eye bolt. Make sure your line's clear. And then you're going to loop. I just used an old strap that I broke trying to do something. And that's not enough slack. I need some more slack. All right. Take out the slack. All right, I would love to have the confidence to just stand right here and winch this sucker in, but I've broken 5/8 inch cables and 7,500 pound tie down fittings. So I know what can go wrong when you're winching. So I'm gonna stand behind you, outside. Look at that. That's awesome. That is awesome. We can bring a buggy so far in here. I'm still a little nervous. Looks like the center bar bent down a little bit, but that's not what's going to hold it for traveling. So let's get some straps on there. All right, now let's cable out and see if the tie-down straps are going to hold it. Look at that. Look at that. That's exactly what I wanted. That's solid. Now I'm going to leave this hooked up just in case the strap slips or breaks. It's kind of a safety. All right, so now that I have proof of concept, I'm going to finish up all the welds before I park another buggy under here. This turned out fantastic. This is a pretty good mount point around this A-arm. There's nothing sharp to cut this nylon strap. It's right on the ball joint, which is made to handle the entire weight of the front end, plus the shock, plus landing, all that. This little nook in here makes for a great place to strap it. Look at all that room. I did a little measuring because, like I said, I can't calculate how much it is. And at this line, at this point, I've got 25 inches of clearance, which is enough to clear the front light bar with the lights folded back. All right, I gotta fold down the lights. That's a key to it fitting. Just putting the lights down. All right. Holy smokes, that's so perfect. That's perfect. Let's get the blue one in. This is great. And look at all the space up front. That's 3 cross carts. And plenty of room for all kinds of fun up here. It's exactly what I pictured. Yes. All right, so now there's just one thing left to do, and that's to mount our little power panel. It's got a voltage monitor so we can see where our system is at all times. It's got 2 USB ports, 2.1 amps on 2 different ports, charge whatever, your phone, camera, whatever. And then a 12 volt socket output that I run a 150 watt inverter on to charge my laptop or other AC stuff. Small, no coffee pots. So I'm going to run 12 gauge wire. You can have 14 amps or so running 7 feet of wire at 14 gauge wire. If you're going to pull more than that, you need a bigger gauge. I had some 14 sitting around, did some quick math. I don't plan to pull more than 14 amps out of this panel. If you guys want, I can do an explanation of DC power. I understand it really, really well. Let me know in the comments. I mean, I'll shoot informative videos all day long. So I'm going to mount it in here, but this has a front fascia that goes on it. And I'm not going to show you cutting all this out. It's been a long day. I just kind of want to get it done. So basically, it's just going to be hooking the negative to the battery, hooking the positive to the battery, and doing a little system check on it. I'm going to run 2, one in the back, one in the front, and I'll just show you the one. So let's get to it. Alright, so there we go, it's hooked up. It has an on switch so that it's not drawing power from the battery when it's off. So turn that on. We can see our DC voltage is 12.4. Let's see how much draw these lights are taking. They're not taking any. I don't know, that might be right. That could be right, 12.5. Let's see. Yeah, so now we're all set. Alright, well that's it. Trailer outfit is complete, at least the bare bones of it. Obviously I might put in a couple more shelves. I might hang some racks for spare tires. Might add some shelves for spare parts and whatnot. But this was more than enough to give you the ideas of where to go when you start racing yours and when we all start meeting up for events, which it's coming. There's so many people building this. I can't see how this couldn't become a race series in the next 2 years or so. They go together so quickly. I just had a guy that lives about an hour and a half from me, 2 hours from me, and he got a hold of me and just wanted to borrow my jig so he could save $100 on the tubing required to build a jig. I was like, heck yeah, man, come on out. So I mean, it was only a week or less before he had the chassis assembled on the jig and was asking to return the jig. It makes me so happy that these are successful, that they're easy to build. Now, make sure to clean up your wiring, add the appropriate connectors. Don't just have loose wire going to your battery terminals, and add fuses where necessary. All this was just install. There's plenty of inline fuses you can buy at the local auto parts store. They're not expensive, and even though you think you may not need it, that's when you do. If any water leaks in here, shorts out a circuit, instead of burning down my whole trailer with everything in it, it's just going to pop a fuse. So look up the appropriate amperage and wattage to make sure that fuse blows when it's supposed to. DC systems are super simple, so just make sure you finish it. All right, I'm definitely going to finish this, but I think I've given you guys the tools you need. So the next step for me before towing this is actually going to be doing weight and balance. It's the whole premise of my job. I do the weight and balance of aircraft on a daily basis with my job. So I'm going to set up on an airplane they're called fuselage stations. On this I'll probably call it a trailer station or something stupid like that. It's essentially the moment, the amount of torque on a fulcrum. The fulcrum of this trailer is the center point between the wheels. I'm going to set up a reference datum line, which would be the ball hitch, possibly the back end of my truck. I'll have to see how the math works out. And I'm going to set up in inches where all the weight lines up which means I have to know the center balance for each of these carts. All the equipment I'm putting on here, it's recommended this trailer has 500 to 700 pounds tongue weight, which usually you just throw stuff in there and you go, but I'm more analytical than that. I'm more precise, more dedicated. I don't know what you want to call it, more weird about it. So, and I'm kind of excited to do it because it's just applying cool math to something practical. So if you want me to shoot that video, and if you want to balance your trailer out or know how to do the formulas to get the correct weight and balance for tongue load, efficiency, a weight range, and where to put stuff in your trailer per weight and how, I'll definitely do that. It's no big deal. It's my daily job, so it'd be pretty easy to explain it. So I hope you enjoyed it. There's definitely more to come, especially where I'm taking these. So definitely stay tuned, and thank you guys for watching.